for being here. Last week I was teaching and I taught on Solomon and leadership through wisdom. And then we found out that, he had wisdom, but then he didn't use it well sometimes, did he? And married a bunch of women, had a bunch of concubines, and they led him astray because they believed in different gods. And so God took the kingdom, or split it in half, took the northern kingdom away from him and gave it to somebody else. Jeroboam was who he gave it to. Well, they didn't do real well either, did they? The northern kingdom of Israel had their problems. And their leaders were terrible. I mean, Jeroboam, the next one was bad. The next one was worse. The next one was worse. There was 7 guys, Jeroboam and 6 others, till we get to Ahab. And every time it seems like, and this one did worse than the other one did. And this one did worse than he did. It's like, goodness, how bad can they get, But that's where we come in. Our story today is about Elijah and his leadership that he had. And it says here the title of the lesson is Leadership in Loneliness. He spent a lot of time alone. And but let's delve into that a little bit here. We're going to start. Well, there we go. We're going to start at 1 Kings 16. Toward the end of the chapter there, it says, Ahab becomes king of Israel. Ahab's daddy was the king before him for a while. He was a general for the other king, who was Elah, king of Israel. And then they had Zimri rebelled against him, but old Omri was the general of the army, and he got rid of Zimri. And so he reigned in Israel for a while, but he did bad things too. And Ahab was his son. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria over Israel for 22 years. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. He set an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also had Asherah poles and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than did all the kings of Israel before him. This guy not only worshipped all these foreign gods, he made them not foreign by building a temple for Baal in Samaria. So this guy was a bad guy. And the tilted all the way over is he married Jezebel. How many of y'all know anybody named Jezebel? People don't name their daughters Jezebel, do they? Because she was so wicked. So. Well, this is where Elijah comes in. It says in verse 7 in chapter 17, Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, As the Lord the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word. Interesting there in that Baal was kind of like the storm god. He provided rain. That was one of the things he did. And so they served him because you have to have rain, right? So things will grow. And Elijah approaches Ahab and says, there's not going to be any dew or rain here till I say there's going to be. And so that puts a fence into Ahab here. But what are you talking about? Baal will say when we have rain. All right. So what does Elijah do? He says, when he follows God, he says, then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Leave here, turn eastward, and hide in the Kerith ravine east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food. So he did what the Lord said, or what it told him. He went to the Kerith ravine east of Jordan and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. Interesting thing here, it says in our little study Bible here, how the people of Israel thought when they crossed that Jordan River, what happened when they crossed the Jordan River? Something stopped. Well, yeah, sorry. You know, the river stopped, so they crossed it.
The manna also stopped.
Manna. God fed them manna until they crossed that river. And when they ate the fruits of the promised land, the manna stopped. So they thought, all right, we're good, right? But all of a sudden they started serving other gods over the years, and God was pointing out to them, or I think the way what it is God says, it's not where you are that gets you food and water and sustenance, but it's who you're following. I let y'all come into this promised land, and y'all follow me, and all these things will be provided you. I provided for you across the Jordan. And it's not because you crossed that Jordan that you're eating and enjoying a full life. It's because you're following me and doing what I'm asking you to do. So he sends Elijah back across the Jordan. And there he feeds him his manna, I mean, he says the ravens are going to be providing you bread and meat twice a day. Oh, that's pretty good eating there. To have meat twice a day. And we might not want to eat from a raven, I guess. That would be something I'd have to get used to myself. But of course, they were not supposed to eat a raven either. That was not the meat. I think that was forbidden in the old law there. But anyway, God took care of Elijah that way. Until what? What happened?
The river dried up.
All right. Right. This creek he was sitting by, I don't know how big it was. You said a river.
River, creek.
Yeah.
Body of water.
So anyway, it dried up after a long time, right? Because God had not told him, all right, it's going to rain. You can release this curse you have put on there. So God tells him to do something. He says, get up and go to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. Now, that's back across the Jordan now. Sidon is over there on the coast of the Mediterranean. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. Who could say, I can read this story? How many of y'all have heard this story before, though? I mean, this high. If you're in church, you know this story. You've heard it all your life. Welcome back, ladies. I told the guys to save your seats for you, so you got plenty of places to sit. So what happens here? He comes to the Zarephath and meets his widow. What's she doing? Gathering sticks. What's for? One more meal. But what does Elijah say? Yeah, give me first. I need some bread. Could you? First, he says, "Could you give me some water?" And she's going to get water. Well, how about a piece of bread too? He said, well, that's what she says. I don't have any bread. I'm going to make some. I got a little bit of flour, a little bit of oil, and that's it. My son and I are going to eat that and die. But he tells her, do not fear. Bring mine first, and you'll never run out of flour and oil until the Lord sends rain to this land. Okay, so now the ravens are not feeding him anymore. The water ran dry at that creek, so now he's with his lady in Zarephath and her son, her family. He says, don't be afraid. Go home and do as I have said, but first make a small loaf of bread for me. Okay. She went away and did what Elijah had told her. So there was food every day, Elijah for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoke by Elijah. Then, sometime later, it says, her son got sick. And she went to Elijah and says, have you turned against me here? Has the Lord turned against me? So what does Elijah do? Right. Hand me the boy. She handed him the boy. He was not breathing. And he took him upstairs into his room. Well, Elijah had it pretty good there, huh? I mean, he had his own upstairs room. Took him upstairs and prayed for him. Brought him back down alive. And the widow believed for sure that the Lord was with Elijah and that he was the true God. All right, and after that, after a long time, it says in chapter 18, after a long time in the third year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah, go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. 3 years down, no rain. That is a long time. It gets dry, dusty in just a month or so. I've seen a month go by without rain, I think, here. And we're one of the rainiest places in the U.S., but I have seen it go for a while. Then it gets bad, you know. And I know some summers, years ago, is one summer I was in, we always have a reunion I go to, family reunion, and we're in the woods, on the river. So there's water in that river. But if it hadn't rained in a while, you go walking into the woods a little bit, things are just wilted. Trees are wilted. It's like, man, trees hardly ever just wilt in the deep woods. But I've seen that happen before. But it's just amazing how bad plants need water. And I thought you were.
Finish your thought, then I will.
Oh, okay. It's just amazing how water is so important. and for Elijah to say, no water till I say so. And of course, he's going to get permission from God first, but that's the thought, though, Dave. Is how badly God made us to need water, made the earth to need water.
I thought it was interesting where he said no dew or rain. The reason I say that, I planted my fields last year for honey, and we didn't get any rain for like 30 days. And I just knew I was going to have to replant. And I go back, and they're not lush and green, but they're up in the green. And all I can figure is the humidity, the temperature change creates dew regularly in that area, down in these bottoms, and every one of my fields were up. It didn't rain, so when he said no dew or rain, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. All right. But he talks to, let's see. Then we got Obadiah coming into this story here. This is an interesting little thing. And now the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab had summoned Obadiah, his palace administrator. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hid them in 2 caves, 50 at each, and supplied them with food and water. So Elijah had it made by himself. God was looking after him, provided him with food and water. So I'll go to this widow over here, and she provided him with food and water. Obadiah was doing the same thing, and evidently Elijah didn't know about it, did he? He thought he was the only one. All right, he sends Obadiah out, Ahab does. He says, you go to half the kingdom, I'll go to half the kingdom. We got to find water so that we don't have to lose our animals here, mules and horses and stuff. So he sends them out. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground and said, is it really you, my Lord Elijah? And he said, yes, go tell your master Elijah is here. Of course, this worried Obadiah because he knew how badly Ahab hated Elijah, because Elijah had told him, it's not going to rain here. And so this guy who worships the god of storms and rain, Baal, was not getting any rain. And he'd been praying to his God, I'm sure. He had his prophets praying to this God for rain for 3 years. It hadn't rained. So and I can just see how it's God using this, like, I'll show y'all, you worship this God of rain, but it's not going to rain because y'all have fallen away from me. Okay.
It's amazing how stubborn we can become, if we're not careful. Because how can you not recognize that it's not there? There's something more. Like, how can you not turn back?
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Right. I guess it's one thing to think you can do it yourself. Oh, I can dig a well deep enough to do this, and or something like that. But to think, no, it's not the God that I was taught to, that brought us out of the land of Egypt, and provided all kind of miracles for us to get here. It is God that I made up with, and I've moved into this land, and these people are serving, so I'm going to serve this guy.
They did that to keep from going to Jerusalem. Jeroboam didn't want to go to Jerusalem because he was afraid to lose.
Right, right.
Ahab knew the history. He had to. There's no way he could know this.
Well,
It's amazing.
yeah, Jeroboam made 2 calves to. I don't want people going to Jerusalem. I'll lose them. They'll go back to serving God in Jerusalem instead of me. Yes. Who was it? Grady.
one of the most valuable lessons we have from not just Elijah, but everybody that's mentioned in Hebrew chapter 11. All those names, you can say they had faith. What kind of faith did they have? They had faith that was obedient. And they did what they were told to do. And if we don't have obedient faith and a deep understanding of that kind of faith is necessary to please God, it's not the kind of faith where you say, oh yeah, I believe in God. Then you don't do nothing with it. You just say, well, I'm a believer. Because there's a lot of people running the world that's telling you, all you gotta do is believe in Jesus and you're saved. And that's just as wrong as it can be.
Yeah.
And, you know, I look at Elijah, and he was translated. So, that,
I'm sorry, he was what?
he was taken away.
Oh, yeah.
He went up in a chariot full of fire. You know, he had that kind of faith. And I every day I ask for that kind of faith. And we pray prayers for the sick all the time. Do we really believe that that's going to be answered? And I don't want to hear, well, I don't know that that works today. Well, if you don't, the scripture tells you this too. If you don't believe that God answers prayers, why are you praying then?
Yeah.
That's my
And
my
you said,
soapbox.
at the beginning of it, you said that obedient faith.
Obedient
You
faith.
got
That's
to
what I
obey.
said.
I mean, James says that the demons believe and shudder.
People will take the book of Romans and they'll use that as a way of saying, all you gotta do is believe. That's all. You just gotta have faith.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta have the kind of faith that you're obedient. Look what did Jesus say as he was leaving, as he was ascending up into heaven. You gotta be baptized. You gotta believe, you gotta be baptized.
Obadiah here has that believing faith. He served King Ahab. He was a palace administrator. And Jezebel, the queen, was killing the prophets of God. And Obadiah was secretly carrying them away and putting them in a couple of caves. And then he found those caves for them. All right, here, y'all stay here. I'll feed you. I'll bring you food. I'll bring you water. He was the ravens that Elijah had. I mean, God had provided those ravens for Elijah to stay fed and taken care of. Obadiah was providing sustenance for the other prophets, 100 of them.
That's amazing in itself, how he fed 100 people every day without being called.
Really?
It's a miracle.
Yeah. I think we need to. God should have put that in the Bible more, and we could have a whole chapter about that.
God has been involved with that, there's no way he could.
There is a book of Obadiah, but it's not this guy. All right, anything else? So Obadiah was scared, though, that when Elijah says, go tell King Ahab I want to see him. And I want to see him today. And he says, he'll kill me because he's looked all over the world for you. He sent people to different countries and made them swear that you were not there because he wanted to kill you. And if I go and tell him that you're wanting to see him, and he says, and then all of a sudden you're not there, then he'll kill me for just thinking I've lied to him and getting his hopes up. But Elijah says, for sure, I'm going to see him today. So he did, and he meets Ahab. In verse 16, so Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, Is that you, you troubler of Israel? Interesting how Obadiah meets him and says one thing, and Ahab meets him. Back in verse 7, as Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down into the ground, and said, "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?" And Ahab says, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" Of course. And then Elijah tells him, "I'm not the trouble of Israel. It is you, your fathers, and your family. That's the trouble of Israel. I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You've abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me at Mount Carmel and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." Now, look at this. Who's feeding these guys, huh? Jezebel, his wife, has 400 sitting at her table. So she's taking care of them. So they got folks. Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled prophets at Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel, by the way, is right on the Mediterranean, and a little high point there. And Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." Interesting what they did, though. It says, but the people said nothing. And I could imagine that would make him irritated there too, huh? The people just said nothing. Reminds me of growing up, Daddy always read these stories to him. Br'er Rabbit, Br'er Fox, all that. And the tar baby. Y'all remember the story of the tar baby? He said nothing. He didn't say anything. And made the Br'er Rabbit pretty bad. Anyway, I'm sorry about that. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God." Then all the people said, "What you say is good." So that's what they're going to do. What happened here now? Remember the story? And y'all could, if I missed something out, I'm just going to tell it like I remember it. So they did all this, get that bull prepared, the prophets did, and they called on Baal to start the fire. I can imagine they would have been real tickled if they had just seen a spark or something, right? But no, nothing happened. And they started ranting and raving. It went on for a while. Got themselves tired. They cut themselves, bleeding, and just going into a frenzy. And then Elijah, after that, he starts taunting them a little bit. Maybe he's asleep. Maybe he's he's tired, or maybe he went on a trip. He's not close by right now. But they're just having a fit, right? Wore themselves out, praying to Baal. So it came to be the time of sacrifice in the day. And so, all right, my turn now, right? So Elijah prays to God. And But then he says, all right, now, I want some water on this sacrifice. I've cut it up. I built this altar here, 12 stones for the 12 tribes of Israel. Put the wool on it, cut it up, put it on there. And he said, pour some water on it. And they put enough water. They poured on it some more. And it was soaked with water. Had a ditch around it. Filled the ditch up with water. There was no way that thing could just spontaneously combust, right? But then Elijah prays, and God sends down fire from heaven, burnt the bull up, the sacrifice up, burnt the altar, licked up the water around the altar, and it was just an amazing sight, right? I can imagine. The people of Israel who had sat quietly by him wouldn't answer, who are you going to serve today? Now they're, okay, their eyes are opened, right? This is a great victory for God, great victory for Elijah. And he says, all right, don't let any of these prophets from Baal escape. And they got them all out, and he took them down to the river, the running water, and killed them, all of them. And then he goes back up to Mount Carmel, and he says, and he tells Ahab, says, I can feel it. It's going to be raining here pretty soon. I can hear the water. So he goes up there to Mount Carmel and prays to God. He says, y'all go back, and you better get on down quick because it's coming. So he prays, and and the rain starts coming. The sky starts getting dark, and then he miraculously, well, let me just see. Let's see, verse 44, the seventh time the servant reported, a cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea. By the way, he talks about a servant here. I didn't know Elijah had a servant. Well, I did. I knew he had a servant. But it's funny how he just mentions it here as a servant. And a cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea. So Elijah said, go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you. So, meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds, and the wind rose, and the heavy rain started falling, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. So, the power of God got him to Jezreel before the king did, right? So this is a great victory here, right? I mean, there's a problem of Baal worship in Israel. Yes?
One of the things that I find fascinating in this story is the meaning of the names in Hebrew for Mount Carmel and the Kishon River. Mount Carmel is vineyard, and Kishon River is a river of entrapment. It also means to bend or to curve. I just thought all those Baal prophets got trapped and were, killed at the river of entrapment. In modern day, that river in Israel is one of the dirtiest, filthiest rivers. They've had so many problems trying to clean it. I think that's
really?
So, a lot of times we have these metaphors in the Bible, but this is a one-to-one.
Yeah.
Very interesting stuff.
Yeah. Very good. Anyway, so he beats him back. This is a great victory for Elijah, right? He's been in the wilderness, being fed by the birds, had a great drought, and then the widow takes care of him. And now he goes and the time is up for this drought, right? So God says, go back, tell Ahab about this drought. Going to end, but you got to meet him on Mount Carmel. So got all these prophets. The king is there, the problem was, him worshiping Baal too. So all of a sudden, there's no Baal prophets around, and so he ought to have he should do a victory lap, right? But he doesn't. He goes back, and immediately Jezebel sends him word, says, by tomorrow, you're going to be just like these prophets you killed, and I'm going to kill you. So, after doing this, seeing God's power, and you're the prophet of God, you would think, well, I don't have any worries. God is on my side. Is God on our side today? But do we feel alone, though, sometimes? Powerless? Are we afraid? I know I am, and not just spiritually though, but physically. I got a stopped up drain in my washing machine, and I was trying to fix it all day yesterday, and didn't want to pay a plumber for weekend rates. So hopefully I can get it unclogged later on today. But you worry about stuff like that, right? We need to give things over to God more. But Elijah here, so is he perfect? He's just like us. He's afraid. He's got a threat on his life here from the queen. So he takes off. And he goes to, yes, sir.
It amazes me in a way that this is kind of a repeat of those of Israel that have witnessed things that only God could do. And here he is, he has this huge victory. He has seen this miracle. He's seen God answer his prayer, and how powerful this is. I think about how he says, get all these prophets. Who was there to do that? But anyway, they're all slaughtered. Their God is made, it's a mockery of their God. It's just like, you have nothing. You have no power. My God. And he does all that he does. And then a woman makes a statement. And that's, it's like he just throws up his hands and says, I'm done.
Yeah.
And we see that over and over. And we can give those people a hard time. Like, you saw only what God could do. No one could do what God would do. And he was fighting for you. He's on your side. But it still happens today.
Yeah.
And so we should never be so proud to not think that our challenge could happen too and could rock our faith. And lean on those days where we had tremendous victory, tremendous favor and blessing from the Lord. It's kind of like in a marriage, you can have all these years of full of love and everything that a marriage could be, but it seems like when marriages go astray, it only takes this one little thing to wipe out all that good, all that lifetime of experience. I've just seen it with others, and you hear that, they split up, and you're just like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
They were so in love, and it's, you forget to look back. And even as far as yesterday, you forget to look back at how God has blessed you, how he's provided for you. And in marriages, you know, how this person stood by your side. But here comes this one little thing. And we quit looking back.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I think that's why, Paul says that we need to exercise our faith. And, you know, I'm thinking of Terry, you know, this here lately, he's been, increasing his weight limit. And I know if I see it on Facebook, and, you know, he exercised, not his, well, I'm sure he exercised his faith too, but we can see Terry is a prime example, is that he exercised and he's continually growing. And the only way, we all have valleys and highs in our life with our faith and with everything. God said it's going to be like that. But I think it's so important that we exercise our faith, use our faith, so that we have a history of knowing that God is going to be there for us. And it's so important because life has a way of hurting us spiritually.
Yeah. I do. Yes, sir.
Jezebel didn't make an idle threat. Obadiah had reminded Elisha that she killed all the prophets of God.
Right.
All but 100. So that wasn't an idle threat. And I suspect emotionally he was quite fatigued. Not only with the ordeal of the sacrifice, but the fact that afterwards he killed 850 men. There was 450 prophets of Baal and 400 of Asherah. That's an emotional toll to have to execute 850 people. And so that with physical fatigue and emotional fatigue, I think, I don't know how many of us could comprehend and persevere and rely on our faith to carry us through.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty normal emotion that most people would have factored through, even with all the things he'd seen. Because that wasn't an idle threat she made.
Right. And he believed it. And he was afraid, you know. And we wonder, you know, look at it, back at it, and said, well, he just did this, so why is he afraid of her? But then, I mean, he just told the king what to do. He said, hey, get back, hurry up and hit your horse up and go, because it's going to rain real big. It's a, you know, you're telling the king what to do. You know, killed all the prophets, and you're the ringleader of all this. You're making it happen, right? So you could sit back on your haunches. Oh, man, I did pretty good. I've showed them God is real, and they need to follow God now. They ought to be doing that. Yes, sir.
The reason he was afraid of Jezebel, he realized who the power was. Ahab may have been king, but he was not the power in the palace. She was. She was directing all the murders and everything.
And she was the meaner of the two, huh?
She not only was meaner of the two, but she had the power of the two.
Yeah, yeah.
My people, they don't think they're children of Jezebel.
That's right. Anyway, one of y'all said something about the hills and the valleys and all that. It seems like that's the way life is, though, isn't it? We can do good. Things are going well. Spiritually, we're great. And we feel great about that. But then, things just, sometimes they go down, and if that's what we got to use that. See, we got to, wherever we are, we need to realize that, I think. Realize you're up here high, and it said, and you got to know that, you know, it might not be this, and it might not be this pretty quick. You know, tomorrow it might be totally different for some reason or another. But you got to keep it level. The way is narrow and straight, Christ says. So you don't want to waver too much from going down that narrow way. You got to hit the curve and bounce back, I guess. You know where the curve is. All right. Oh, and then he runs away, right? It goes to Beersheba. Well, you look at a map, Beersheba is way down south into Judah, the bottom part of Judah. And he goes and lays down under a broom bush, it says. And then God sends him, so he's there by himself now because he left his servant behind. And so he's again by himself under this broom bush. Angel of the Lord, it says in, let's see, 19 verses 5, then the, oh no, this is it. Look at this. Chapter 19, Elijah, it says in verse 3, Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came to a broom bush, sat down under it and prayed that he might die. My goodness. This is from such a high, and all of a sudden, boom, like that. I have had enough, Lord, he says. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. And then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. So he was, I've had enough, he says. That's amazing, isn't it? Have we ever felt that way? Oh, I've had enough.
If you hadn't had enough, you hadn't done enough.
I'm sorry, who said that? I can't. Oh, okay. No, that's fine. I I don't hear well, so I was wondering, where did that come from?
What'd you say?
I said, if you haven't had enough, you haven't done enough.
Okay.
Well, all right, Johnny.
I wonder if he hadn't had high hopes that Israel was going to turn back to God, because the people said, you know, the Lord is God, the Lord is God, and they executed all these false prophets, and maybe he had hoped that now finally we're going to go back to where we should, and when he realized that it's not going to change,
Yeah.
no matter what I do, it's not going to change. So what I can't do.
Yeah.
I think he just gave
He
up.
still gets threatened by some high-powered people after he's gotten rid of all the prophets. And the king seems to be, well, okay, looks like he might be okay. He's doing what I tell him to do. But then his wife threatens him, and he's afraid. Says, I guess he's thinking, well, Lord, I thought this was going to do it. Yeah, I thought this was going to do it. This is all I had to do. But no, that was not it. And then he wants to give up. But God's looking after him again. All at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank, and then he laid down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up, eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up and ate and drank, strengthened by the food. He traveled for 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. All right, so Mount Horeb is even farther south. They think that's Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. And then the Lord appears to Elijah. The word of the Lord came to him. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" That's an interesting question. God ever ask you what you're doing here? And how do we answer? He replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me. The Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Asks the same question, huh? And gets the same answer. He replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to the death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. The Lord said to him, go back the way you came and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king of Israel. And anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat from Abel Mohala, to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escape the sword of Hazael, and Elijah will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him. So God finally comes to him and tells him what to do. And it's like, snap out of it. I got something for you to do. And that's what we got to be. When God asks us what we're doing, tell him. And but anyway, just try to keep an even keel on in our lives. That's the leadership message here. Leaders are going to have problems. Christians are going to have problems. Ups and downs. You're going to have victories. You're going to have defeats. Got to keep with it. And always listening to what God says. Listen to that whisper. All that rowdiness and carrying on earthquakes and fire and all that kind of stuff. You have to go through that. Listen to the whisper. All right. Thank you, guys.